1990, 5 to 6 years old. I started getting nightmares when I saw unexplainable things that creeped me out, such as insulators and other things that gave me that yellow dotty feeling wave of sensation that used to creep me out. I used to have nightmares of about seeing these unexplainable things that creep me out. I used to have dreams about seeing insulators up close. Well, almost seeing them up close, but dreams related to that. I also used to have dreams that I used to also have dreams about a tunnel that I used to like going to when driving through Boston. I used to have a dream I used to see that tunnel. It used to have fluorescent lights in there, and I saw this extremely bright orb of light near the fluorescent tube lights. I used to become horrified during the day that I would have a reoccurring dream of it. Other dreams would also include seeing odd insulators on power lines, sunsets, and other things that creeped me out. Most of these dreams involved feeling that rush of energy through my body that felt like yellow circles, and I'd be afraid I would feel it forever. I would often wake up crying and ask my mom to sleep next to me. Whenever she did, I would feel better immediately. I felt like her presence was powerfully healing and comforting. At that age, I didn't know what dreams were, and I thought I was the only one that had them. I used to call them commercials. The fear of seeing things that invoked that yellow circle rushy feeling used to increase, and I continued to have bad dreams. My mom decided to take me to a hospital in Boston to get testing done. For some reason I knew it wasn't going to be like... For some reason I knew I wasn't going to like being there, and I didn't look forward for it. On the way to the hospital, we went to that tunnel in Boston in which I had the bad dreams about. I hid my head under the seats. I hid under the seats until I saw sunlight and we were out of the tunnel. Once we got to the hospital, my mom dropped me off, and I thought I was in a prison. It was like being in prison. I thought I was going to stay in there forever. I stayed calm, luckily. I saw a bunch of doctors and they gave me a lot of tests. Most of the tests consist of looking at pictures and answering simple questions. I got really scared during one of the tests though. This test involved connecting a bunch of wires to my head. I started getting really scared. I shook violently and cried. I thought they were going to put all these wires inside my head. The doctor held me down. Even though they were being sympathetic for the most part, I thought they were mad at me because of the way they told me to keep on relaxing. The doctors decided to contact my mom. I talked to her and I felt better immediately. My mother came to pick me up 3 days later. I felt like I stayed there for a week. The results of the tests that I took made the doctors suggest to my parents that I should be institutionalized and live at that hospital permanently. My mom thought about it and felt like it might be a reasonable idea. My dad, however, totally disagreed about the thought of it and said, "Over my dead body." My mother took me home later that day, and on the way home, I looked at all the subways and wanted to ride it. I had no idea how close I was to having to stay there permanently. I was unaware that my life almost took a completely different direction, and because of my dad. Now my life is fortunately taking a different direction instead because I got to leave the hospital. I started going on long rides to calm me down from the fear of experiencing those yellow circle energy rushes. I used to ride for miles. I liked the feeling of going on long adventures. Adventures felt like freeing in an unexplainable way. Coming home from these long rides felt like an accomplishment, almost emotional, like watching the end of a good movie. I usually rode down and climbed up a tall hill, and then I would turn around and ride back down it. I discovered a river along the route and started to enjoy walking on it. I used to think the river went on forever in the woods. My fear of seeing insulators up close started to decline by the end of the year. I stopped getting episodes where I feared feeling that rush of yellow circle energy. I still experienced it today, but instead, I enjoy it now, however. In fact, my compassion of telling you this is making me feel it now, and it feels great. I usually feel it when I'm happy and joyous now. I often feel them a lot when I see something that strikes my emotions in a positive way, such as the ending of a good movie, or just talking about this right now. My interest in power lines continued to increase. I continued to draw them, and I started building small versions of them in my front house. I was 6 then. I used to sneak over to other houses in my neighborhood and steal long pieces of wood or boards. This was when I lived by the water. I used to learn how to use a hammer, and I attached cross arms. Learned how to use a hammer, and I nailed boards along these long boards to make cross arms that you see on power lines. And then I strung string using light gauge wire. After I built them, I used to think they were any different than real ones. I enjoyed it a lot. I felt like I had a power line to make my imagination come to life. I really enjoyed doing this, however, my neighbors often got upset because I often went in their front yard to dig holes. I started to get obsessed in palm trees during that summer. I don't know what exactly got me interested in them, but I thought they were beautiful. I used to wear palm tree shirts all the time. I felt like I became part of the palm tree whenever I wore one, and it gave me a wonderful feeling. My mom started buying me palm tree shirts a lot, and I was really glad she did. I used to get really upset when my sister wore one though. I often threw fits and cried. I loved coconuts, but unfortunately I didn't like the taste of them, and I wish I did. One time I cried for 2 hours straight, and my mom asked me why, and I said, "My sister likes coconuts and I don't." My mom thought I was hilarious. My mom bought me travel magazines from tropical places. I used to cut the pages out and tape them on the wall. I used to stare at the picture of palm trees for long periods of time. My mom told me that there were a lot of palm trees in Florida. I started wanting to go to Florida, but my mom said she couldn't afford it. I started to pretend that I went on trips to Florida when I played. I used to swing on the swing set and pretend I was on a odd flying machine that ran along a track in the sky. When the machine reached Florida, I pretended to get out and walk along the neighborhood pretending I was in Florida. I pretended all the houses I saw was a place in Florida. I was no longer interested in trains once I started really getting into palm trees. And that was kind of a surprise because I was obsessed with trains, but now that interest started declining. However, my interest in palm trees continued to grow for 2 months, and then suddenly it slowly died out, and I started focusing my attention on power lines as that interest continually to grow. As my interest in power lines continued to exist, I also started getting interested in electricity. I started getting interested in looking at wires and how electrical circuits worked. This was around Christmas. The intricacies of the wires used to fascinate me. I asked my mom to buy me electrical stuff like plugs and light switches. I remember opening up one present, and it was a light switch. I was really happy. My grandmother bought it for me. One time I even tried to take a plug out of the wall, and I got shocked in attempting to do so. I didn't like the feeling. In spite of my growing interest in electricity in general, lightning storms used to terrify me. During lightning storms, I often would hide under my bed. Thunder and lightning storms used to terrify me so much, I often didn't go outside on cloudy days, at night, even during the winter, never mind the summer. I often had very blissful dreams that involved driving on a highway. These dreams were extremely peaceful and very intense in terms of enjoyment. I would see myself in a car, and I would be I'd be driving near a bunch of other cars on a highway. I would experience a great sense of appreciation of being part of the flock or caravan of other cars on the highway. I enjoyed feeling equal to the other cars and a part of the whole experience. These dreams were often vivid and very beautiful. These dreams made me realize later that I have always wanted to be accepted and viewed as an equal. I always wondered, why don't I feel equal? Why do I always feel different? Why don't I like myself? Will I eventually find out these feelings I'm having are not true? Will this feeling eventually go away? I wasn't sure.